welcome to Sleepy Story Facts, where tonight's gentle bedtime story invites you to drift slowly into a calm and glowing corner of the inner solar system, where the planet Venus turns with unhurried grace beneath its bright veils of cloud. And as this relaxing story begins, you may simply settle your body a little deeper. Let your jaw unclench. Let your shoulders soften and allow the day to loosen its careful grip. Because there is nowhere else to be now except here, inside this quiet sleep story, inside this soft nighttime story, where every word is designed to help you fall asleep, to carry you toward deep sleep, and to surround you with calming narration and gentle bedtime wonder. As we float together through darkness so peaceful, it feels almost like warm silk laid over the mind. And before we go any farther, take one slow breath in, as though you are drawing in cool starlight, and then breathe out, as though you are releasing every unfinished thought into a vast and patient sky. And once more breathe in, a little slower this time, and breathe out, letting the muscles around your eyes grow smooth and heavy. Because tonight there is no need to solve, no need to hurry, no need to hold anything up. For Venus itself teaches a softer rhythm, moving in a way that seems almost dreamlike, almost secretive, almost as though it belongs more to the language of sleep than to the language of clocks. From far away, Venus shines so brightly in Earth's sky that for thousands of years people watched it in the morning and evening and felt a quiet sense of companionship. And now, in this serene little voyage, we leave behind busy roads and glowing screens and all the small machinery of human schedules. And instead, we drift outward on a cushion of stillness, approaching a world wrapped in pale gold cloud, a world often called Earth's twin because its size is so similar, and yet a world whose mood is entirely its own, a world of tremendous atmosphere, slow turning time, and skies hidden beneath thick layers of brightness. As we draw nearer, the first relaxing fact arrives softly. Like a blanket being folded over your thoughts, Venus is covered almost completely by clouds. And those clouds are so dense and so continuous that they hide the surface from ordinary view, turning the whole planet into a quiet lantern of reflected sunlight. And that is why Venus appears so luminous from afar, because it sends so much light back into space, glowing not harshly, but steadily, like a distant pearl suspended in the hush of evening. Within those cloud decks, high above the rocky ground, are droplets rich in sulfuric acid, though here in our gentle bedtime telling they do not feel sharp or alarming, only strange and wondrous, reminders that the universe has many textures, many forms, many ways of being beautiful, and that even a planet whose air would be impossible for us can still become, in story, a place of calm contemplation. Below the clouds, the atmosphere grows thicker and heavier and more immense, until the pressure at the surface becomes one of Venus's most remarkable facts, pressing downward with such force that it would feel, to a visitor in a daydream, like the deep and steady weight of an entire ocean resting overhead. And yet, even this immense pressure can be imagined peacefully tonight, not as something frightening, but as a symbol of stillness, of quiet layers folded upon layers, of a planet wrapped so completely in its own atmosphere that it has become a sealed chamber of ancient patience, and patience is the true rhythm of Venus, because Venus turns extraordinarily slowly, so slowly that one rotation takes longer than many other worlds would need for entire seasons to pass. And more curious still, Venus rotates backward compared with most planets, as though it preferred to spin in contemplation rather than in agreement. As though in the early silence of the solar system, it made a private choice to move to its own tempo forever after. And there is something deeply soothing in that, something tenderly reassuring, because not everything in the cosmos must rush in the same direction, and not every beautiful thing must hurry to be understood. Imagine now that we are gliding above the bright upper clouds, where the sunlight is softened by pale haze, and beneath us, the planet curves away in creamy gold and muted amber, with no sharp edges anywhere, only layers upon layers of vapor, brightness, motion, and hidden stone. And in this floating moment, time seems to lengthen, to stretch like a soft ribbon, because on Venus, a single day, measured by one full turn of the planet, is astonishingly long, longer than its year, in one of astronomy's gentlest little paradoxes. So that there, in a sense, the sun would seem to visit the sky on a schedule far slower than the planet's own journey around it, and that fact alone is enough to quiet the mind, because it reminds us that time is not one simple thing, but many different streams flowing side by side through the dark. So as this gentle bedtime journey continues, let your thoughts become cloud-like too, slow and drifting, and softly illuminated from within. And notice how easy it is when the voice grows calm and the science grows dreamy, to let your awareness rest on simple images: a bright planet in the twilight, a sea of hidden clouds, a world where the atmosphere is thick beyond easy imagination, a world where rotation itself seems drowsy, deliberate, and almost ceremonial. And if any waking thought still lingers at the edge of your mind, you may place it gently aboard Venus's slow turning motion and let it circle away, farther and farther, until all that remains is the velvet dark, the luminous cloud tops, the hush of space, and this soothing sleep story carrying you one quiet breath at a time toward rest. Now, as this sleep story continues, we drift a little lower through the pale and shining cloud gardens of Venus, where everything seems softened by distance, by brightness, and by the slow, dreamy character of a world that keeps its secrets tucked behind layers of luminous air. And in this bedtime story, there is no need to hurry past any detail, because Venus rewards a patient gaze, the kind that lingers gently like moonlight on curtains, and notices how the upper atmosphere is not still in the way a sleeping room is still, but still in the way a deep river is still, flowing steadily, smoothly, and with such broad confidence that motion itself begins to feel restful. Here, high above the hidden ground, winds move far faster than the planet beneath them rotates, circling the globe in a remarkable pattern, sometimes called superrotation, a lovely scientific fact that means the atmosphere can race around Venus, while the world below turns with extraordinary slowness. And there is something almost magical in imagining that contrast, as though the clouds have learned to dance while the planet has chosen to meditate. And as you listen to this relaxing story, you may let those two rhythms soothe you together: the swift whisper of cloud and the vast patience of stone, the moving and the unmoving, the breath and the silence between breaths. Venus, you may remember, spins in the opposite direction from most planets in our solar system. A backward rotation so unusual that the sun, if we could safely stand upon the hidden plains, would appear to rise in the west and set in the east. And yet, even that reversal feels calm tonight, because in the universe, there are many ways to turn, many ways to keep time, and Venus offers one of the quietest reminders that difference is not disorder, that a strange rhythm can still be a beautiful one, and perhaps even a comforting one, when the mind is ready to let go of familiar schedules and float into deeper rest. As we descend into brighter folds of mist, the sunlight grows diffuse and creamy, scattered by thick layers of cloud, until there are no sharp shadows, only a soft radiance spread in every direction. And this is one of the most peaceful images Venus gives us: a place where light itself seems drowsy, where brilliance becomes gentle, where the sky would not blaze, but glow. And because Venus reflects so much sunlight, more than any other planet in our sky, it has long appeared to human eyes as a brilliant beacon at dawn or dusk, earning names like the morning star and the evening star, though it is of course a planet, not a star at all, just a bright and cloud-wrapped neighbor keeping company with Earth from across the dark. And as this nighttime story folds around you, another soothing fact arrives on quiet feet. For Venus is similar to Earth in size, with a diameter only a little smaller, and that resemblance is one reason people once imagined it might be lush or ocean-covered beneath its clouds, a twin world waiting behind the veil. Though what lay below turned out to be very different, a landscape shaped by volcanic plains, ancient lava flows, broad rises of highland terrain, and a surface hot enough to melt lead, all hidden under an atmosphere made mostly of carbon dioxide so deep and dense that it traps heat with overwhelming efficiency, creating a greenhouse effect of astonishing power. But even this fierce reality can be held gently here, translated into the language of calming narration, not as danger, not as alarm, but simply as wonder, as evidence that planets are each their own kind of poem, built from pressure, chemistry, sunlight, and time. And Venus, for all its intensity, remains a poem written in slow motion, one whose lines unfold over ages rather than minutes. Imagine now that we are floating within the upper cloud levels, where temperatures are milder than the blazing surface below, where the haze around us glows gold-white and soft, and where every direction feels like the inside of a pearl. And let that image become your whole attention for a moment, because in a gentle bedtime journey like this one, focus need not be effortful. It can simply be restful noticing, a quiet willingness to remain with one peaceful thing at a time: the curve of a cloud band, the gradual turning of a hidden planet, the idea of a day on Venus lasting longer than its year, which still feels almost like a lullaby disguised as astronomy, a reminder that the cosmos is under no obligation to make ordinary sense when it can instead make beautiful sense. And perhaps that is why Venus belongs so naturally inside a story designed to help you fall asleep. Because it invites the mind away from sharp edges and toward broad, floating mysteries, toward slow cycles and softened light, toward the strange serenity of a world that rotates so lazily that one solar day stretches on and on for many Earth months, until the very concept of morning seems to yawn and settle back down again. So if your thoughts have been busy, let them borrow Venusian time now. Let them lengthen and loosen. Let them move with less urgency, because deep sleep often begins when the mind no longer insists on racing ahead. And this sleep story asks nothing more of you than gentle listening, the kind that becomes half dream before you even notice it. While above and around us, the cloud tops continue their vast and whispering circuit, bright, high, and endlessly smooth. And somewhere far below them rests the hidden surface of Venus, ancient and unseen, beneath an atmosphere 90 times the pressure of Earth at sea level, a weight so immense that it speaks not of motion, but of profound stillness, layer over layer, sky over sky, until the whole planet feels wrapped in its own heavy blanket, turning backward, shining outward, and keeping its long, slow vigil in the inner solar system as we drift beside it, quieter now, sleepier now, and ready to continue deeper into its glowing hush as our sleep story continues in the same soft and unhurried rhythm. We drift through a layer of Venusian brightness, so smooth and pale that it seems less like weather and more like a dream made of light. And in this gentle bedtime passage, shaped with the same slow pacing you asked for, there is only the quiet sense of floating onward through a world that hides itself kindly behind cloud after cloud. And the more we remain here, the more Venus begins to feel like the perfect planet for a bedtime story, because almost everything about it moves in a way that asks the mind to slow down, to loosen, to release the habit of urgency, and to rest in the long, steady thought of a world where even sunrise takes its time. Round us, the clouds stretch for thousands of miles in creamy layers. And though Venus is often imagined as fierce from the outside, from here, the upper atmosphere feels like a vast golden garden of mist, where the sunlight is filtered and softened until every edge disappears, and where the sky becomes one continuous glow, gentle enough for the imagination to settle into as if it were lying down beneath warm covers. One of the loveliest facts about Venus is that its cloud tops circle the planet far more quickly than the solid world below, completing a journey in only a few Earth days, while the planet itself turns with extraordinary slowness. And that contrast creates a kind of cosmic lullaby. Fast clouds above, patient stone below, like thoughts passing over a mind that has already chosen to sleep. If we were to keep descending, very carefully and only in imagination, we would pass through cloud layers that sit high above the hidden surface. And there, around roughly 50 kilometers above the ground, the pressure becomes surprisingly close to what human beings know on Earth, which is a soft and curious reminder that even on a planet so different, there are altitudes where the atmosphere briefly feels more familiar, as if Venus, beneath all its strangeness, still contains a few quiet echoes of home. But below those levels, the air deepens and thickens and grows immensely heavy, made mostly of carbon dioxide, with pressure at the surface so great that it is often compared to the weight a diver would feel deep beneath an ocean. And while that might sound intense in daylight conversation, here in this relaxing story, it becomes something almost comforting to imagine. Not danger, but layers, blanket upon blanket of air, a whole world tucked in beneath its own enormous coverlet. Venus also has almost no significant seasons in the way Earth does, because its tilt is very small. And that means the planet does not lean dramatically toward or away from the sun over the course of its year, so there is no swift page turning from spring to summer to autumn to winter, only a steadier repetition of heat and cloud and long light, as if Venus has chosen one mood and decided, very peacefully, to remain within it. And perhaps that is one reason it feels so suited to calming narration, because it is a planet of continuity, of persistence, of rhythms too broad to be broken by small disturbances. And as you listen, you may notice how your own breathing has begun to borrow that same steadiness, how each inhale arrives without effort, and each exhale leaves a little more silence behind. Another soft scientific wonder is that the solid surface of Venus is hidden from ordinary sight, because visible light cannot simply slip through the dense clouds and reveal the land below. And for that reason, much of what we know about its mountains, plains, ridges, and volcanic features has come through radar mapping, a patient human act of listening with instruments rather than eyes, which somehow feels deeply appropriate for a nighttime story, since the sleeping world, too, is often understood more by sensing than by seeing. Beneath those unseen clouds lie immense plains shaped by ancient lava, broad highlands, and towering rises such as Maxwell Montes, all resting in the hot hush below. Yet, from where we float now, none of that appears harsh or jagged, because the cloud ocean above smooths every thought into softness, and the hidden surface becomes not a place of noise, but a place of distance, an old and silent floor beneath a glowing ceiling. Venus completes one orbit around the sun in about 225 Earth days, yet its sidereal rotation takes about 243 Earth days, which means that one full spin on its axis lasts longer than its year. And this remains one of the most soothing facts in all planetary science, because it feels like a direct invitation to stop counting so carefully, to stop measuring everything by fast terrestrial standards, and to accept that in some corners of the cosmos, a day can be so long that it almost ceases to feel like a unit and becomes, instead, a season of stillness. And because Venus rotates backward, that long day unfolds in reverse from what many planets know, with the sun appearing to rise in the west and set in the east, a reversal so graceful and strange that it quiets the mind rather than startling it, like hearing a lullaby played gently on an unfamiliar instrument. Even the brightness of Venus from afar, that beautiful shine seen from Earth in evening and morning skies, comes from the clouds around us now, which reflect a great deal of sunlight back into space, turning the planet into one of the sky's brightest presences, not because it burns like a star, but because it wears light so generously, and in that reflected light, we continue to drift, the sleep story growing softer, the bedtime story growing slower, the relaxing story carrying you farther from the busy architecture of the day, until it no longer matters what was left undone, because Venus has its own lesson to offer, a lesson written in cloud and pressure and slow rotation. And the lesson is simply this: not all motion must be hurried. Not all time must be divided into sharp little pieces. And not all understanding must arrive at once. For some truths are meant to surround you gradually, like haze around a bright planet, like a gentle bedtime whisper, like the long, soft turning of a world that seems content to take almost forever. And as you rest here with me above the golden cloud sea, you may let your thoughts do the same, lengthening, dimming, drifting, until the mind becomes as calm as this hidden world, and sleep begins to gather quietly at the edges, ready to draw nearer. And now, as our gentle bedtime journey continues in the same slow and unbroken style, we drift a little farther down through the layered brightness of Venus, where the clouds above and around us seem less like weather and more like folds of pale silk, suspended in a golden sleep story. And the hush here feels so complete that even science begins to sound like a lullaby, each fact arriving softly, each detail settling over the mind with the calm patience of evening. And tonight, this relaxing story remains devoted to the dreamy wonder of Venus, that glowing neighbor of Earth, a world so bright in our sky, and yet so hidden in its own atmosphere. And as you listen, you may simply let your thoughts become slower and softer, because Venus itself is a master of slowness, a planet that turns with such extraordinary patience that it almost seems to prefer lingering to moving, resting to hurrying. And one of the most soothing facts of all is that Venus has no moon at all, no companions circling nearby, only its own solitary path around the sun, as though it had chosen a quiet room in the solar system where it could keep its own company in silence. Below us, though still far beneath our floating point of view, lies a surface shaped by immense plains of ancient volcanic rock, broad rises, and scattered mountain regions. And scientists believe that volcanoes played a major role in shaping Venus long ago, perhaps resurfacing much of the planet in vast episodes that spread lava across enormous distances. Yet from here, those hidden lands feel peaceful rather than dramatic, because the thick atmosphere above them softens every image, every thought, every imagined horizon, until even geology seems sleepy. The deeper atmosphere of Venus is made mostly of carbon dioxide, and that heavy air traps heat so efficiently that the surface remains astonishingly hot, hotter even than Mercury despite being farther from the sun, which is one of those quiet cosmic surprises that reminds us how much an atmosphere can matter, how a blanket of gas can hold warmth close and create a world entirely different from the one distance alone might suggest. And perhaps that is why Venus feels so intimate in this nighttime story, because it is a planet defined not only by rock and orbit, but by the soft and powerful presence of air, layer upon layer, invisible yet decisive, like the unseen heaviness of sleep settling over a tired mind. And still, for all that heat hidden below, the upper clouds remain our place of drifting calm, where the light is diffuse and the pressure is gentler, and where one can imagine hovering for a very long time in pale brightness, while the whole world beneath turns so slowly that clocks lose their meaning. And that slowness becomes even more beautiful when you remember that Venus rotates backward, east to west, in a direction opposite to most planets, as though in the earliest ages of the solar system it received some ancient nudge and decided from then on to keep a different rhythm, one no less graceful for being unusual, one perhaps even more comforting, because it reminds us that peace does not depend on conformity. Another relaxing fact arrives here like a feather settling on still water. Venus has only a very weak intrinsic magnetic field compared with Earth, likely because its slow rotation does not stir its interior in quite the same way. And while that may sound technical in the daylight world, in this calm narration, it simply becomes another expression of Venusian quietness, another sign that this world is not one of rushing currents and restless turning, but of immense atmospheric blankets, long durations, and subdued planetary music. And because the clouds conceal the ground from ordinary sight, much of Venus was revealed by radar, with spacecraft sending signals through the haze and receiving echoes back, a patient conversation between human curiosity and a hidden planet. And there is something deeply soothing in that image, the idea that not everything must be seen directly to be gently understood, that some worlds are known the way sleep approaches, indirectly, gradually, by feeling, by resonance, by a softening of outlines rather than a sharpening of them. Imagine now that the cloud layers around us are slowly changing shade, from cream to amber to pale honey, not because the atmosphere is hurriedly shifting, but because the angle of sunlight is endless and dreamlike on Venus, where the long solar day stretches across many Earth weeks. And if such a sunrise or sunset could be witnessed safely, it would not rush across the sky, but linger and linger, as though the whole planet were breathing in slow motion. And perhaps your own breathing has begun to mirror that pace now, deep and unforced, easy and regular, each exhale carrying you farther from the bright, busy edges of waking thought and nearer to that gentle inner quiet where a bedtime story becomes almost part of a dream. Venus, so often called Earth's sister because of its similar size, teaches a very different lesson from Earth's blue and lively one. For this is a lesson in hiddenness, in pressure, in slow rotation, in cloud decks so thick and reflective that they turn the planet into a brilliant lantern in the evening or morning sky. And from afar, that brightness looks simple, almost serene, while up close it reveals countless layers and mysteries, just as the calmest nights often contain the deepest thoughts before they finally dissolve into sleep. So let us continue drifting here, not downward too quickly, not toward any sudden destination, but calmly through this golden atmosphere where the facts of Venus arrive one by one, like quiet footsteps in a dim corridor where time itself feels softened by distance. and where the mind can safely rest in the thought of a world wrapped in cloud, turning backward, shining brightly, holding immense pressure below and gentle haze above, keeping its secrets without urgency and offering, in its own strange and beautiful way, the perfect companion for deep sleep. A gentle bedtime voyage through science that asks for nothing except your willingness to float, to listen, and at last to let go. Tonight, continuing in the same soft welcome and settling rhythm established by your sample's sleepy, science-led narration, we drift even farther into the serene mystery of Venus, where the cloud light above us remains smooth as brushed silk, and the unseen world below waits in complete and ancient patience. And as this sleep story carries you onward, you may notice how naturally the mind begins to loosen when it is given something so slow, so distant, and so gently wondrous to follow. Because Venus does not ask for urgency. It does not rush its secrets toward us, and it does not spin with the quick confidence of other worlds, but instead turns in a way that feels almost ceremonial, almost dreamlike, as though the whole planet has agreed to move at the pace of rest itself. Beneath us, far below the bright upper haze, lie broad volcanic plains that cover much of Venus, old expanses of rock that once flowed in liquid fire and then cooled into immense quiet fields. And though the word volcanic can sound sharp in the waking world, here in this bedtime story, those plains feel calm and still, like old dark seafloors beneath layers of glowing air, places where all heat has become memory, and where time has pressed every restless moment into silence. Scientists have found that Venus appears to have relatively few small impact craters compared with some other rocky worlds, and one reason may be that its thick atmosphere can break up smaller incoming objects before they ever reach the surface, which gives the planet a strangely sheltered quality, as though its immense air is not only a blanket of pressure and heat, but also a protective curtain, filtering what arrives from the black quiet beyond. The surface itself is hidden from ordinary eyes by those deep cloud decks above, and that hiddenness lends Venus a special kind of softness in a relaxing story, because what cannot be seen all at once can be imagined slowly, gently, in pieces. A rise of land here, a plain there, a distant ridge under amber haze, all of it resting in a stillness so complete that even the idea of movement seems to fade. There are highland regions on Venus, elevated lands that rise above the wide plains, and among them are places with names that sound almost musical in the dark, lands mapped by patient instruments and careful human listening. And it is lovely to think that a planet so hidden has been known not by hurried glances, but by steady attention, by signals sent through cloud and received in return, by curiosity willing to move softly and wait. Venus is also remarkable for how uniform its day and night temperatures tend to be at the surface, because the atmosphere is so thick and so efficient at moving heat that there is not the sharp contrast one might expect between sunlit and shadowed places, and that gives the whole world a strangely even mood, a planet wrapped so thoroughly in its own air that heat becomes shared, distributed, settled into everything like warmth, held beneath a heavy winter quilt as we float lower in imagination, never too quickly and never so close that the calm is broken. You can almost sense the layered character of Venus as a kind of lullaby in 3 movements. Bright, reflective clouds above, dense and heavy air in the middle, and old volcanic stone below, each layer keeping its own tempo, each one contributing to the restful character of this nighttime story. Another soothing fact glows quietly here. Venus has mountains, ridges, and large circular volcanic features called coronae, broad structures thought to be shaped by the slow forces inside the planet. And even these grand geological forms do not feel jagged tonight because distance has softened them, because the cloud veil remains between us and every hard outline, and because, in this calming narration, every fact arrives not as a demand for attention, but as a cradle for it. If Earth is a world of blue openness and quick weather, Venus is a world of enclosure, of continuity, of slow atmospheric thought. And perhaps that is why it helps the mind fall asleep so gently, because there is something deeply restful about a place where so much is covered, muffled, and held within, where the surface is hidden, where the day is long beyond ordinary feeling, and where the great turning of the planet seems less like motion and more like a sustained breath. You may let your own breathing join that rhythm now, not trying to breathe deeply, not trying to do anything at all, simply noticing the easy rise and fall, the quiet repetition, the way each breath seems to drift through you, the same way those Venusian winds drift through cloud bands far above the ground, steady and unhurried. And as this bedtime story continues, the facts themselves begin to feel like soft lanterns placed along a dim path. Venus is close to Earth in size, yet profoundly different in atmosphere. Venus is brilliant in our sky because its clouds reflect sunlight so well. Venus turns backward slowly, almost impossibly slowly. Venus hides ancient plains and highlands beneath pressure so immense that the lower air feels almost oceanic. Venus keeps its own lonely orbit without a moon. Venus reminds us that the universe contains not only drama and brightness, but also patience, veil, and hush. So we remain here, suspended in imagination between glowing cloud and buried stone, letting the relaxing story grow softer around the edges, letting the mind wander without effort over hidden plains and shield volcanoes and old ridges beneath the haze, until the science no longer feels like information alone, but like weather for the soul, a warm and drowsy atmosphere settling over thought, carrying it slowly toward deep sleep, until even the idea of a faraway planet becomes less a place than a feeling, a slow golden feeling, enclosed, peaceful, and wonderfully still. We continue now in the same slow, soothing, science-woven rhythm established for this bedtime journey, letting the voice remain soft and unhurried as the story drifts deeper into the veiled wonder of Venus, where cloud, pressure, and time all seem to move in broad and drowsy circles rather than in sharp little steps, as we float together through this gentle bedtime world, still suspended above the unseen plains and old volcanic lands. Venus begins to offer one of its most calming gifts, which is not only brightness or mystery, but duration, because almost everything here unfolds with such extraordinary patience that the mind can finally stop gripping the clock and simply rest inside a longer feeling of existence. A single rotation of Venus takes longer than its journey around the sun, and that fact returns tonight like a familiar lullaby, not because it needs to surprise us again, but because it deserves to settle more deeply into the imagination. A planet whose day is longer than its year, a world where the simple idea of morning stretches so far that it becomes something like weather, something like a season, something like a long golden sigh moving through the sky. If we could safely linger above this hidden world and watch the sunlight shift through the upper clouds, we would not see the quick passing of hours as we know them on Earth, but an almost ceremonial progression, so slow that brightness itself would seem to doze across the atmosphere, lingering over the cloud tops and diffusing through the haze, as though the whole planet were reluctant to disturb its own rest. And perhaps that is why Venus feels so naturally suited to a sleep story, because it invites us to imagine time not as something chasing us, but as something large enough to carry us, gentle enough to hold us, and quiet enough to dissolve the sharp edges of thought until the mind, like the planet, turns more slowly and with less resistance. Around us, the atmosphere remains layered and luminous, with high winds moving through the cloud tops in their graceful circling paths, while the hidden surface below keeps to its ancient stillness under tremendous weight. And this contrast between motion above and quiet below feels almost like the rhythm of falling asleep, where a few last thoughts may continue to drift overhead even as the deeper self is already settling down into silence. Venus's air is mostly carbon dioxide, and beneath the cloud layers, it grows denser and heavier until the pressure at the ground becomes immense. Yet, tonight, even that pressure can be imagined tenderly as a deep planetary blanket, a whole sky folded many times over, pressing downward, not with violence in our story, but with the steady finality of sleep itself, the feeling of being tucked in by layer after layer of warmth and stillness, until there is nowhere left to fall except inward, toward calm, somewhere below, hidden by the bright veil that visible light cannot easily cross, lie ridges, plains, shield volcanoes, and ancient surfaces mapped by patient radar. And there is something profoundly restful in knowing that Venus reveals itself this way, gradually, indirectly, by echoes and returns, by careful listening rather than quick seeing, as though even science, on this particular world, had to learn to whisper. The clouds around us remain rich with soft, reflected sunlight, which is why Venus shines so beautifully from Earth's sky, often becoming the brightest planet visible to the naked eye. And it is pleasant to imagine, just for a moment, that while someone on Earth might be glancing up at that evening brightness and calling it beautiful, we are already here within its calm interior, drifting through the glowing mist, as though inside the pearl-like heart of twilight itself. Venus has no moon circling nearby, no familiar companion drawing tides or silvering the night, and that solitude lends the planet a distinctive mood, a quiet self-containment, as though it keeps its own long counsel while traveling around the sun. And in this nighttime story, that solitude does not feel lonely at all, only peaceful. The peace of a room finally emptied of noise, the peace of a thought that no longer needs to be spoken aloud. Even the backward rotation of Venus seems gentler the longer we stay with it. Not odd now, not contrary, but graceful in its own private way. A reminder that rest does not always arrive by the expected road, and that sometimes the softest path into deep sleep is the one that turns away from usual patterns and chooses a slower orbit through the dark. So let us remain here a little longer in the middle atmosphere, where the golden haze is neither day nor night in any familiar sense, where the upper winds continue their endless, whispering circuit, where hidden lands wait below in furnace heat and ancient quiet, and where time itself seems stretched until it becomes almost weightless. And as this relaxing story keeps moving with careful tenderness, you may notice that your own thoughts are no longer gathering into sharp shapes, but thinning like mist, spreading like pale cloud, becoming less interested in answers and more willing to drift. Because Venus is teaching the oldest sleepy lesson of all, that not every mystery must be solved before rest can come, and not every horizon must be seen clearly to be trusted, and not every turn must be quick to be meaningful. In this slow and glowing place, above the secret plains and below the brilliant scene from Earth, there is only the long whisper of Venusian time, the soft enclosure of cloud, the deep hidden pressure beneath, and the quiet companionship of a planet that takes almost forever to turn. And as we float beside it, held in this calming narration, the story grows softer still, the science gentler still, and your waking mind, like the dim edge of sunlight on a far cloud, begins at last to fade, continuing in the same slow, soothing, science-woven style you established for this long-form bedtime journey. This chapter remains a single flowing passage with the gentle pacing and sleepy atmosphere suited to sleepy science story facts. Now we drift a little farther through the soft haze of Venus, not rushing, never rushing, only gliding through a place where cloud and light and hidden distance seem to fold over one another like layers of warm fabric. And in this sleep story, the planet feels less like an object to be studied and more like a vast and silent presence keeping watch in the dark, a glowing world wrapped so completely in its own atmosphere that everything about it encourages the mind to slow down. Here the light is still pale and diffuse, never sharp, never demanding, because the cloud layers of Venus scatter sunlight into a steady radiance, and that radiance seems perfect for a bedtime story, for a nighttime story, for any relaxing story meant to help you fall asleep, because nothing here flickers too quickly, and nothing here asks to be chased, and even the science arrives with a kind of hush, one quiet fact at a time, like soft footfalls across a carpeted room. The clouds around us are rich with tiny droplets, and high in the atmosphere, they form a bright reflective cover that helps make Venus the brilliant evening and morning light so many people notice from Earth. Yet inside that brightness, there is no clamor at all, only the feeling of being enclosed in pearl-colored mist. And as we move through it, you can imagine that every thought you carried into the night is growing gentler, becoming less solid, less urgent, more willing to drift. One of the most peaceful things to remember about Venus is that its atmosphere does not simply sit still over the slow-turning planet below, but moves in broad currents, circling the world much faster than the solid body rotates. And this great atmospheric flow feels, tonight, like the final whisper of waking thought above a mind already settling into deep sleep. The clouds gliding overhead, while something deeper and quieter below remains calm, warm, and undisturbed. Far beneath us, the surface pressure grows greater and greater, layer after layer of air pressing down until the lower world lies under an immense weight. But from where we float now, that heaviness becomes strangely comforting to imagine, like the idea of many blankets tucked carefully over resting form, each one adding stillness, each one helping the hidden plains remain silent through the long Venusian day. And what a day it is, not brief, not hurried, but almost unbelievably long, because Venus turns so slowly that its day stretches beyond its own year, and the mind, hearing that once more, can simply loosen and stop measuring, stop comparing, stop keeping count in earthly ways. For this is a planet where time itself seems sleepy, where morning and evening would linger and linger if they could be seen through the haze, and where a single turn of the globe feels less like motion than like a patient meditation unfolding over months. Venus also spins backward compared with most planets, and the longer we remain here, the more that backward turning seems not unusual, but tender, as though this world, in some ancient and quiet act of independence, chose a softer rhythm for itself and never abandoned it. And there is comfort in that, comfort in the thought that peace does not always follow the common direction. Somewhere below the bright cloud decks, hidden from ordinary sight, are wide lava plains, uplifted highlands, ridged regions, and old geological forms shaped by heat and time. And because they are concealed from us now, they do not arrive in the mind as harsh landscapes, but as distant, sleeping terrain beneath an amber veil, a world known partly through radar, through echoes, through patient listening rather than direct vision. And that too feels appropriate for a gentle bedtime voyage, because sleep often comes the same way, not by sudden clarity, but by softening, by dimming, by the gradual loss of outlines. Another lovely detail about Venus is that its tilt is very small, so it does not lean into strong seasons as Earth does, and that gives the planet a steadier mood, a more continuous expression, as though it has chosen to remain in one long atmospheric state instead of turning the page from season to season. And perhaps that continuity is part of what makes this calming narration feel so restful, because the world we are visiting does not swing between sharp opposites, but lingers in its own warm, enclosed constancy. Even the chemistry of the clouds, strange and severe in scientific terms, becomes here only part of the mystery. Another reminder that the universe can be both unfamiliar and beautiful at once, and that beauty does not always need softness at every level in order to offer softness to the imagination. So we continue drifting, suspended between bright upper cloud and the unseen furnace world below, held in this gentle bedtime current. And if your thoughts are becoming slower now, if your breathing is quieter now, if the story feels less like words and more like atmosphere, then you are already doing exactly what Venus asks of the night, which is simply to linger, to soften, to allow the long whisper of cloud and pressure and slow rotation to carry you onward, farther from the day, farther from clocks, farther from noise, until the bright hidden planet around us becomes a cradle of pale gold stillness, and your mind, like the veiled face of Venus itself, grows serene, enclosed, and wonderfully ready for deep sleep, still following the calm, unbroken, sleep-friendly style established in your sample. We continue this gentle Venus journey as one long, flowing passage, with the chapter heading kept separate, and the continuity log resting in its own paragraph below. Now we drift through an amber hush so soft and complete that it feels as though the whole atmosphere of Venus has become a kind of cradle, carrying us slowly between brightness above and hidden stone below. And in this bedtime story, there is no need to arrive anywhere quickly, because Venus is a world that teaches the art of lingering, the patient beauty of remaining suspended in wonder without asking for sharp outlines or sudden answers. Around us, the cloud layers seem endless, smooth and luminous, and impossibly deep, like silk curtains arranged one behind another across the face of a golden dream. And through them, the sunlight is scattered into a warm radiance that never strikes harshly, never startles, but simply glows in every direction with the steady softness of a lamp left burning in a peaceful room. It is easy here to understand why Venus has always appeared so bright in Earth's sky, because these reflective clouds return so much sunlight to space that the planet shines like a polished lantern in the dawn or evening. And yet, from within this brightness, there is only calm, only haze, only the floating silence of a world wrapped so thoroughly in its own atmosphere that even its fiercest realities feel distant and muffled. Below us, though still far below, the lower atmosphere grows denser and heavier and more immense, pressing down toward the hidden plains with a force that would be overwhelming on the surface. But in the language of this relaxing story, the pressure becomes something else, something almost comforting, a deep planetary blanket folded again and again over ancient volcanic lands, sealing them beneath layers of warmth and stillness, until the very idea of wind on bare rock seems remote and dreamlike. Venus, with its slow backward turning, continues to offer one of the most soothing rhythms in the solar system, because this is a planet that does not rush its days, does not spin briskly into morning, but moves with such extraordinary deliberation that time itself seems to soften in its presence. And as you listen, you may feel your own thoughts beginning to do the same, turning less sharply, moving less urgently, no longer trying to keep pace with the day that has now fallen behind you. If Earth is full of quick weather, changing light, and familiar cycles, Venus feels enclosed and continuous, a planet of persistence, of long durations, of cloud tops gliding above, while the hidden world below remains deep in its own heavy sleep. And that contrast between the broad motion of the atmosphere and the profound stillness beneath makes this nighttime story feel almost like a mirror of the mind as it drifts toward deep sleep, where a few final thoughts may still pass lightly overhead, while the deeper self has already grown quiet. Somewhere beneath these glowing layers lie ridges, uplands, lava plains, and wide old formations shaped by ancient internal forces. And because they remain concealed from our view, they arrive in the imagination not as harsh landscapes, but as sleeping terrain, distant and softened by haze. A secret geography resting below a sky so thick that ordinary sight cannot easily cross it. There's something especially peaceful in that hiddenness, because not everything beautiful needs to be fully visible, and not every mystery must be opened all at once. Some worlds are meant to be approached slowly, by atmosphere, by suggestion, by gentle understanding, and Venus is surely one of them. Even the famous slowness of its solar day, stretched across so many Earth weeks, begins to feel less like a scientific curiosity and more like a lullaby, a quiet reminder that somewhere in the cosmos there is a place where dawn itself would seem to yawn and linger, where the sun's progress through the sky would be so gradual that it could almost disappear into pure sensation, into the feeling of light changing without any need to mark the hour. And because Venus rotates in the opposite direction from most planets, there is an added softness to its strangeness, a sense that it is not merely slow, but serenely independent, keeping a private rhythm, following a silent choreography written long ago in the early solar system. The clouds around us continue their broad, circling flow, moving far more quickly than the solid planet beneath them. And this too feels deeply restful tonight, like thoughts slowly dissolving into dream while the deeper body remains still. And if your breathing has grown easier now, if your attention has begun to blur gently at the edges, then perhaps you are already floating in the same calm pattern, a little movement above, a great stillness below. So let us remain here in the amber quiet, above the sleeping stone of Venus, and below its bright, reflective heights, letting this sleep story keep its soft hold on the mind, letting the calming narration continue to smooth away the last small tensions of the day, until all that remains is the sensation of drifting beside a cloud-covered world that shines outward and turns slowly inward, a world of pressure, glow, and long, patient time. And in its company, the busy parts of thought can finally grow dim, can finally grow weightless, can finally, without effort, begin to fall asleep, continuing in the same soft, unbroken cadence established by your sample. We let this chapter remain a single flowing passage, calm and slow, and designed to feel like a warm current carrying the mind toward rest. Now we drift a little deeper into the lower cloud world of Venus, where the amber light grows softer rather than darker, and where every layer of air seems to settle over the next, with the patience of blankets being drawn up one by one on a quiet night. And in this sleep story, there is no need to picture anything harsh or sudden, because even the great facts of this planet arrive gently here, translated into the language of bedtime, into the language of stillness, into the language of a relaxing story meant to help you fall asleep and remain floating there, somewhere between science and dream. The clouds around us feel endless, a soft architecture of haze and brightness. And though we know they are part of a vast and extraordinary atmosphere, tonight they seem almost tender, as if Venus has wrapped itself so completely in light that it has become a lantern with no sharp edge. Only glow, only depth, only the peaceful mystery of a world that prefers to be known slowly. Beneath us, far below, and still hidden from ordinary sight, the pressure continues to build through the descending layers, deeper and heavier and more complete. And yet, in this gentle bedtime telling, that pressure becomes soothing to imagine, not because it is small, but because it is total, because it suggests a world so fully enclosed that nothing is left exposed to noise or rush. A whole planet tucked into itself beneath an atmosphere of immense devotion. Venus turns on its axis with such unhurried grace that it almost seems less like rotation and more like contemplation. And as we remain beside it, the old wonder returns again, so soft now it feels like a lullaby you have already heard and loved. That this planet's day is longer than its year. That time here does not march, but lingers. That morning and evening would stretch so slowly across the hidden world below that they might feel like thoughts too drowsy to finish. And because Venus rotates backward, opposite the direction chosen by most of the planets nearby, there is an extra quietness to its character, a sense that it has been keeping its own private rhythm since the earliest ages of the solar system, never in conflict, never in haste, simply turning as it turns, content to be strange in a peaceful way. The upper winds still move high above us in their broad, swift circuits. But here in the deeper haze, everything feels more hushed, as though the atmosphere itself has lowered its voice for the sake of sleep. And perhaps that is why the mind settles so naturally in this nighttime story, because Venus offers a place where motion and stillness coexist so beautifully, with cloud currents gliding through the heights, while the buried plains below remain ancient, warm, and silent under the weight of the sky. Somewhere beneath these layers lie wide volcanic fields, gentle rises of highland terrain, ridges, and broad geological forms shaped long ago. But from where we float, they remain hidden, softened by distance, translated by haze into something less like landscape and more like memory. And there is peace in that hiddenness, peace in not seeing everything at once, peace in allowing a planet to remain partly veiled, while the imagination supplies only the gentlest outlines. Even the brightness that makes Venus such a familiar evening presence, when seen from Earth, feels different from inside, because here the reflective cloud cover becomes not a point of light in a distant sky, but an entire atmosphere of luminous softness. And if someone below were lifting their eyes at dusk and noticing that brilliant planet near the horizon, we might imagine their gaze meeting this very glow, this same pearled radiance in which we now drift so quietly. Venus has no moon beside it, no silver companion traveling close, and that solitude deepens the sleepy mood of the planet, making it seem serene and self-contained, like a room that holds only one lamp and one chair, and the perfect amount of silence. As this calming narration continues, you may notice that your thoughts are no longer arriving in clear lines, but in softer impressions, like cloud bands seen through mist. And that is perfectly welcome here, because this bedtime story is not asking you to remember every fact, only to rest in them, to let them become part of the atmosphere around you, part of the slow, golden feeling of a world where pressure deepens, clouds shine, and time itself seems to recline. If there is any last bit of wakefulness still clinging to the edges of the mind, you may simply place it here in the Venusian haze and watch it dissolve, the way a sharp outline dissolves in bright fog, becoming less insistent, less separate, more willing to join the larger quiet. We remain suspended between the glowing cloud ocean above and the sleeping stone below, held by the same long, soothing rhythm. And little by little, the facts of Venus begin to feel less like information and more like weather for the soul, the slow rotation becoming a breath, the pressure becoming a blanket, the hidden plains becoming a restful distance, until the whole planet seems to hum with one gentle message, repeated over and over in the softest possible voice. Slower now, softer now, deeper now. And in that message, this sleep story continues to carry you onward, not toward any sudden ending, but toward a calmer and calmer dark, where thought thins, where tension loosens, and where the mind, like Venus itself, beneath its endless cloud cover, can finally surrender to stillness, continuing in the same slow, single paragraph, sleep-friendly structure you requested. And in the calm narrative spirit of your sample, this chapter remains one long flowing passage designed for sleepy science story facts and gentle bedtime listening. Now we drift a little deeper through the velvet dusk of Venus, where the atmosphere seems to hold us in a soft and endless suspension, and where every layer of cloud and haze feels like one more curtain drawn between the waking mind and the quiet center of night. And this sleep story, this bedtime story, this relaxing story about the slow and hidden beauty of Venus, asks nothing from you except that you remain here in the drift, letting each phrase settle gently, letting each scientific wonder arrive as softly as breath on a cool pillow, because Venus is a planet that seems made for calming narration, a world whose brightest mysteries are wrapped in cloud, whose passing hours feel almost ceremonial, and whose strange and patient turning invites the mind to do the same, to rotate away from the day, away from noise, away from unfinished thought, and toward rest. Around us, the lower cloud layers glow in muted amber, not bright enough to wake the senses, and not dark enough to feel empty, but balanced in that perfect drowsy middle where everything appears softened, where even distance seems sleepy. And if you imagine looking outward through this haze, you would not see crisp boundaries or sharp horizons, only gradations of warmth and gold, only a world dissolving into itself with exquisite gentleness. Venus remains hidden below us, its broad volcanic plains and ancient rises still covered by the immense atmosphere that keeps its surface from casual view. And there is something deeply comforting in that, because this is a planet that does not reveal itself all at once, a planet that teaches you to accept what is veiled, to trust what is suggested, to rest beside what cannot be fully seen. The air here grows heavier as we drift, and though that heaviness would be formidable far below, in this nighttime story, it becomes only another form of stillness, another expression of how completely Venus holds itself together, sky pressing upon sky, layer upon layer, until the whole world feels swaddled in its own atmosphere, tucked in beneath blankets of cloud and warmth and time. And time on Venus remains one of the gentlest wonders of all, because this is a planet that turns so slowly that its day stretches beyond its year. And each time that fact returns, it seems to quiet the mind a little more, as though the very idea of such a long day gives permission to stop counting, to stop measuring, to stop dividing experience into little urgent pieces, and instead to simply float within one continuous moment. The backward rotation of Venus adds another tender strangeness to the scene, a graceful refusal to hurry in the usual direction, a private cosmic rhythm that feels less like rebellion and more like serenity, as though the planet long ago chose the slowest and most dreamlike path available, and has followed it ever since with perfect calm. Above us, higher in the atmosphere, the winds still move in those broad circling patterns that carry the cloud tops around the planet much faster than the surface turns below. And this contrast is soothing to hold in the imagination, because it mirrors the final moments before sleep, when a few thoughts may still be drifting lightly overhead, while something deeper in you has already gone still. Somewhere beneath the bright haze are highlands and old lava fields and folded terrains resting in immense heat. But from here, they seem less like places and more like the memory of places, distant forms sleeping under gold mist. And because they remain hidden, the imagination can touch them only gently, never harshly, never in a way that disturbs their ancient rest. Venus, so often seen from Earth as a brilliant evening or morning light, feels entirely different from within, and yet perhaps more beautiful, because here the brightness is no longer a point in the sky, but an atmosphere all around us, a soft, luminous enclosure that turns the whole planet into a room made of pearl and amber, a room with no corners, no edges, and no need for clocks. It is easy, floating here, to understand why a sleep story about Venus can feel so natural, because everything about this world suggests the long exhale, the release, the unfastening of attention from the hard surfaces of the day. Even its solitude, traveling without a moon beside it, contributes to the peace of the scene, for Venus seems entirely self-contained, a world complete in its own hush, keeping company only with its clouds, its slow turning, and the sunlight it reflects so generously back into space. If your thoughts are quieter now, if they are no longer arriving in words so much as in feelings, in drifting impressions, in pale little fragments dissolving before they fully form, then the story is doing what Venus has been quietly asking all along, which is to slow with it, to soften with it, to let the mind become cloud-like and spacious and untroubled. So we remain here together in the velvet descent, not falling, not rushing, only floating through a planet's great envelope of brightness and pressure and hidden stone, while the calming narration grows gentler and the details become more like atmosphere than information, until the whole experience begins to blur into one peaceful sensation, a sensation of amber cloud, immense patience, backward turning and deepening quiet. And inside that sensation, the listener can finally feel the last small grip of wakefulness loosen and slip away, as though carried off by those far higher winds, leaving behind only stillness, only softness, only the slow and beautiful hush of Venus at the edge of deep sleep. And now, as this sleep story continues in the same soft and unbroken drift, we remain within the lower amber hush of Venus, where the air around us feels velvety and still, and where the planet's long, patient nature seems to smooth every thought into something gentler, quieter, and more ready for rest. Here, in this bedtime story, the clouds no longer feel like a distant feature of a bright planet in the sky, but like an entire world of softness around us, a glowing interior made of haze and light and immense calm. And as we float through it together, you may notice that it becomes easier and easier to let go of the sharp edges of the day, because Venus asks so little of the mind, except that it slow down and follow. The atmosphere remains thick and layered, with each level resting upon the next in great silent folds, and though the deeper air below would become heavier and heavier toward the hidden surface, from here it feels almost like being held inside a vast and quiet chamber, one with no corners and no sudden sounds, only the steady feeling of enclosure, warmth, and distance. Somewhere far beneath these clouds lie the wide volcanic plains of Venus, ancient lands formed by lava long ago, broad stony expanses resting under enormous pressure and heat. But tonight they seem impossibly far away, like something remembered in a dream, rather than something waiting directly below us. And that distance is soothing, because it allows the imagination to rest lightly upon the science without ever feeling burdened by it. Venus, so similar to Earth in size, and yet so different in atmosphere and rhythm, continues to offer its most peaceful lesson through time itself, because this is still the world where a single rotation lasts longer than its year. And every time that fact returns, it softens the mind a little more, until clocks begin to feel irrelevant, and all that remains is duration. The long, tender stretching of a day that seems to have no need to end quickly. If morning could arrive here in any ordinary way, it would not spill suddenly across the sky, but linger and hover and drift, as though sunlight itself had become sleepy and unwilling to hurry. And perhaps that is why this relaxing story can carry you so gently toward deep sleep, because Venus offers a place where even the idea of daylight has been slowed into a kind of lullaby. The planet's backward rotation adds a quiet note of mystery to that lullaby, for Venus turns opposite to most of its neighboring worlds, and yet nothing about that reversal feels harsh tonight, only serene, only private, as though this cloud-wrapped planet has always known a calmer way to move, and has kept to it faithfully through uncounted ages. Above us, in the brighter reaches of the upper atmosphere, the winds still circle more quickly than the solid planet turns below. And there's something deeply comforting in that layered contrast, because it feels like the last little motions of waking thought passing high overhead, while the deeper self, the heavier and quieter self, has already settled into stillness. Venus shines so brilliantly in Earth's sky because its clouds reflect sunlight with remarkable generosity. And from within that reflected brightness, it is easy to understand why people have looked up at dawn or dusk and felt that this world belonged to some special category of beauty, not because it reveals everything, but because it glows while keeping its secrets, and secrecy in a gentle bedtime tale can be a comfort, because not everything needs to be uncovered before sleep arrives. Some things are restful precisely because they remain veiled, because they allow the mind to drift without demanding conclusions. And Venus is a master of that kind of softness, offering hidden plains, hidden ridges, hidden heat, hidden age, all tucked beneath layers of pale and honey-colored cloud. It has no moon nearby, no bright companion circling close, and that solitude deepens the peaceful mood of the scene, making Venus feel self-contained and inward, like a quiet room lit by one low lamp, complete in its silence and perfectly content to remain undisturbed. As this nighttime story continues, your own thoughts may begin to resemble these cloud bands, long and light and unhurried, drifting across awareness without needing to settle into anything firm. And that is welcome here, because this is not a story that asks you to hold on tightly to every detail, only to float with them, to let the facts become atmosphere, and to let the atmosphere become rest. The pressure below, the shining clouds above, the slow rotation, the backward turning, the hidden volcanic surface, the long day, the bright evening star glow seen from Earth. All of it begins to merge into one continuous sleepy feeling, one gentle sense of being carried by a planet whose greatest gift is not urgency, but patience. And patience is what fills the air around us now. Patience in the great layers of cloud. Patience in the hidden stone far below. Patience in the way Venus keeps turning at its own unimaginable pace, never rushing toward dawn, never hurrying toward dark, simply continuing in its vast and restful rhythm. So we do not descend quickly, and we do not turn away, but remain here in the soft lantern light of Venus, suspended between cloud and secret ground, while this calming narration grows even quieter and more spacious until the words themselves begin to feel like mist, and the mist begins to feel like sleep, and all the busy machinery of the day fades farther and farther behind, leaving only this gentle bedtime drift through a golden atmosphere, this slow and luminous world beside you, and this peaceful invitation to fall asleep completely, deeply, and without effort, continuing in the same gentle, science-led, ultra-calming style established by your sample. We remain inside this slow and luminous bedtime journey, letting the narration move as softly as possible through the veiled atmosphere of Venus. Here, in the honeyed stillness of the lower clouds, everything feels suspended between glow and secrecy, between the bright reflective heights above and the unseen volcanic world below. And as this sleep story carries you onward, you may sense that the planet itself has become less like a distant object in space and more like a peaceful room made of amber light, a room with no edges, no clock, and no reason for the mind to keep holding itself so tightly. Venus is a world that invites surrender through slowness, because its great turning is so patient so unhurried that it seems to teach a deeper rhythm than the one we usually follow. And if your thoughts are still moving at all, they may begin to match that softer pace now, lengthening like long cloud bands, loosening like ribbons of haze, becoming less interested in what comes next and more willing to simply float. Around us, the atmosphere remains thick and layered, and each layer seems to rest on the next with a quiet certainty, as if the whole planet were composed of blankets of light and pressure folded over ancient stone. And far below those blankets lie plains of cooled lava, broad uplands, ridges, and ancient features shaped long ago, all hidden beneath a sky so deep and complete that ordinary sight cannot easily pass through it. Yet that hiddenness does not make Venus feel distant tonight, only tender, because there is something deeply restful about a world that keeps itself veiled, a world that does not rush to reveal every detail, a world that allows the imagination to approach slowly, without effort, without strain, the way sleep itself approaches, by dimming outlines, by softening distinctions, by wrapping everything in a calm and golden uncertainty. The brightness that makes Venus so beautiful from Earth is all around us here, scattered through the cloud layers into a soft radiance that seems to come from every direction at once. And it is easy to understand, drifting inside that pale glow, why this planet has long appeared as a brilliant beacon in the evening and morning sky. For even now, it shines not with harshness, but with a kind of tranquil generosity, reflecting sunlight back into space, while holding its own mysteries close. The atmosphere above still moves in broad currents, faster than the solid planet turns beneath it. And that contrast remains soothing, like the faint final motion of waking thought crossing over a deeper inner stillness that has already settled into rest. And perhaps that is one of the reasons this relaxing story can help you fall asleep so gently, because Venus contains both movement and quiet at once, both drifting cloud and patient stone, both the whisper of winds aloft and the profound hush of the hidden surface far below. Its rotation, so slow and so strangely reversed from the usual planetary pattern, continues to feel less like an astronomical fact and more like a lullaby whispered through the solar system, a reminder that there are worlds where time does not rush, where a day lasts longer than a year, where sunrise and sunset would linger so long they might feel like moods rather than moments. And as this nighttime story unfolds, you may let that idea settle into you completely. The idea that not all existence is measured best by speed, that some forms of beauty reveal themselves only through patience, and that rest comes more easily when the mind no longer insists on keeping count. Venus, with no moon nearby to accompany it, travels in a kind of solitary peace, self-contained and inward, and that solitude feels wonderfully appropriate now, because the path into deep sleep is often a quiet one, not lonely, but private and sheltered, like entering a warm chamber where no outside noise can follow. Here in the lower haze, with amber light around us and immense pressure far below, there is no sense of danger, only the sensation of a planet fully enclosed within itself. And that enclosure becomes soothing in the imagination, like being tucked beneath many soft coverings, until the world outside can can no longer reach you. If any thought remains from the day, any unfinished task, any small bright fragment of wakefulness, you may place it gently into this Venusian mist and let it dissolve there, because this calm narration is not asking you to hold on to anything at all, only to drift beside a cloud-covered world whose greatest gift is its patience. The facts of Venus now begin to blur beautifully into feeling. The reflective clouds become a lamp. The immense atmosphere becomes a blanket. The slow backward rotation becomes a cradle-like rhythm. The hidden plains become a distant and peaceful floor beneath the haze. And the whole planet becomes a gentle bedtime presence, a companion in the quiet dark, carrying you farther from the busy language of day and closer to the soft interior of sleep. So we remain here, suspended in this honey-colored stillness near the hidden morning of Venus, where time stretches, cloud glows, and thought grows feather-light. And little by little the story grows quieter than memory, softer than breath, until even the words seem to settle like fine mist across the mind. And all that remains is the feeling of drifting beside a slow and radiant world, enclosed by peace, enclosed by warmth, enclosed by the kind of silence that invites you, at last, to fall asleep, continuing in the same gentle, unbroken, science-soothed style established by your sample. This chapter remains a single flowing passage, with the chapter heading separated, and the continuity log resting in its own paragraph below, just as requested. Now we drift a little farther through the pearl veil of Venus, where the amber tones of the deeper cloud world begin to soften into a pale, luminous hush, and where everything around us feels suspended in a calm so complete that the mind no longer needs to reach for anything at all. Because this sleep story is not carrying you toward excitement or discovery in any hurried sense, but toward a quieter form of wonder, the kind that settles over you slowly, like warm air in a sheltered room, like moonlight through curtains, like the long exhale that comes just before deep sleep begins to gather. Venus remains hidden and glowing around us, wrapped in clouds so thick and bright that they scatter sunlight into a radiance without edges. And inside that radiance, it becomes easier to let thought grow weightless, easier to let every leftover concern from the day become less solid, less urgent, more like mist than matter. Because this bedtime story is built from slow planetary truths, from clouds that reflect light so generously, from air so deep, it seems almost oceanic in its pressure far below, and from a rotation so patient that a Venusian day stretches beyond a Venusian year, which still feels less like a fact to memorize and more like a lullaby whispered across the solar system. Here, in this relaxing story, the long turning of Venus becomes a cradle rhythm for the imagination. And as we float through the quiet layers, you may notice how naturally your own breathing begins to borrow that same tempo, not forced, not measured, simply slower now, softer now, as though the body itself has decided to keep company with this cloud-covered world. Above us, the high winds continue their broad and graceful journey around the planet, moving faster than the solid globe beneath them. And that contrast remains deeply soothing, because it feels so much like the last delicate traces of waking thought drifting across a deeper, inner stillness that has already begun to rest. And below us, though still far beneath the haze, the hidden plains of Venus remain buried under immense atmospheric weight. Broad, ancient lands of volcanic stone, resting in furnace warmth and total enclosure. Yet in the language of gentle bedtime narration, those unseen plains do not feel harsh or threatening, only distant and deeply asleep, as though the whole surface of the planet were lying under blankets too heavy and too warm to ever be disturbed. Venus, with its backward rotation, continues to turn in its own private way, opposite the habit of most other planets. And the longer we remain here, the more peaceful that strangeness feels, because it suggests a world entirely comfortable with its own rhythm. A world not trying to match anything else, not rushing to agree, only continuing through space with serene confidence, shining brightly from afar, while keeping its deepest layers veiled. Even the idea of dawn on Venus becomes dreamlike when imagined at this pace. For any sunrise, there would arrive with unimaginable slowness, lingering over the cloud tops as though light itself had grown drowsy. And perhaps that is why this nighttime story can help you fall asleep so gently, because it offers a place where time loosens its grip, where nothing sudden happens, where the sky itself seems to yawn and stretch and remain half asleep. The clouds around us, rich with strange chemistry and soft reflection, form a world within a world, and drifting through them feels less like travel and more like surrender. A surrender not to emptiness, but to softness, to enclosure, to the feeling of being carried by something vast and patient and completely unhurried. Venus has no moon beside it, no close silver companion, and that solitude gives the planet a peaceful inwardness, like a quiet lamp glowing in a room where everyone has already gone to bed. And there is comfort in that image now, because the path toward rest is often solitary in the gentlest possible way, private and sheltered and undemanding. A little inward voyage away from the noise of day. Somewhere high above, the brighter cloud decks still send sunlight back into space and help make Venus one of the most luminous sights in Earth's sky. But here inside the atmosphere, the brightness is no longer distant at all. It is all around us, diffused through every layer, turning the air into a soft lantern of pearl and honey. And as this calming narration continues, the facts of Venus begin to blur beautifully into feeling, the reflective clouds becoming a kind of canopy, the immense pressure below becoming a deep, invisible blanket, the hidden volcanic plains becoming a sleeping floor beneath a glowing ceiling, and the slow backward rotation becoming a steady rocking motion for the mind. If any fragment of wakefulness still lingers at the edge of awareness, you may simply lay it down here in the pearl-lit haze, because nothing in this gentle bedtime journey needs to be solved, finished, or held tightly anymore. Venus asks only that you drift beside it, that you listen to its long and quiet lesson in patience, and that you allow your thoughts to become as soft as cloud bands, as slow as its turning, as calm as the endless filtered light through which we now float. So we remain here a little longer, not descending too far, not turning back, only resting in the suspended stillness of a world wrapped in brightness and secrecy. where the atmosphere is deep, the day is long, the surface is hidden, and the great cosmic message is beautifully simple. Slower now, dimmer now, gentler now, until this sleep story becomes less like words and more like weather, less like narration and more like a lull, less like a journey and more like the quiet moment when the mind finally stops reaching outward and begins, at last, to fall asleep, continuing in the same slow, unbroken, ultra-calming style established by your sample. This chapter remains one single flowing passage, with the heading separate and the continuity log placed in its own paragraph below. Just as requested, now we drift in a region of Venus that feels almost like the inside of a lantern, where the light is no longer bright in any waking sense, but softened into a mellow, honeyed glow that seems to arrive from every direction at once. And as this sleep story moves onward, the planet around us grows even more dreamlike, more enclosed, more perfectly suited to a gentle bedtime descent into rest, because Venus does not reveal itself in sharp edges or quick moments, but in layers, in stillness, in slow and patient atmospheres that invite the mind to soften along with them. Around us, the clouds remain deep and luminous, one veil resting behind another, each one smoothing the world a little more, until there are no urgent outlines left to follow, only a sense of drifting through pale gold quiet. And perhaps that is why this relaxing story feels so natural here, because a place wrapped so fully in cloud seems to understand what sleep requires, which is not more clarity, not more motion, not more effort, but less, always less, until everything unnecessary falls away and only calm remains far below. Hidden beneath the immense atmosphere, the ancient plains of Venus continue in their long silence, broad volcanic lands sleeping under the pressure of a sky so deep and complete that it feels almost oceanic in imagination. And though those buried surfaces are harsh in physical reality, in the language of this nighttime story, they become peaceful through distance, peaceful through concealment, peaceful because they are held so completely in the planet's embrace that nothing about them seems loud anymore. Venus keeps turning in its own slow and private way, backward compared with most planets, and that unusual motion now feels less like a fact and more like a rhythm that the whole story has begun to inherit, a rhythm that turns away from hurry, away from the usual direction of busy thought, and towards something gentler, something circular and quiet, something that gives the mind permission to stop racing and simply sway. Its day remains unimaginably long, stretching beyond its year in a way that continues to soothe rather than surprise, because each time the thought returns it loosens one more knot of ordinary timekeeping, and that loosening is welcome here, for sleep often comes most easily when the clock fades from importance, and all that remains is one long, tender sense of duration, one spacious interval in which nothing needs to begin or end too quickly. If there were a morning here that we could safely watch unfold through these dense and glowing layers, it would seem to linger for ages, a dawn without haste, a sunrise that did not climb so much as breathe. And there is deep comfort in imagining such slowness, because it reminds the weary mind that not every change must arrive suddenly, and not every passage from darkness to light must be dramatic. Above us, far up in the brighter reaches of Venus's atmosphere, the winds continue their graceful circling faster than the solid world turns below. And this layered contrast still feels like the perfect mirror of the drowsy mind, where a few soft traces of thought may still be gliding overhead, while the deeper self has already settled into stillness, already tucked itself beneath the weight of rest. Venus shines so beautifully in Earth's sky because its clouds reflect sunlight with remarkable devotion. And here inside those same clouds, the brightness has become something interior, something diffuse and enveloping, so that rather than seeing a glowing point in the distance, we are held within the glow itself, inside the soft architecture of reflected light, inside a world that seems made of pearl, amber, and silence. There's no moon here beside Venus, no nearby companion casting silver accents across its haze, and that solitude makes the whole scene feel even more restful, more inward, more self-contained, as though this planet has spent eons practicing the art of keeping quiet company with itself. In that inwardness, there is a lesson for this bedtime story too, because to fall asleep is sometimes to become gently solitary for a while, not lonely, never lonely, but private in the most peaceful sense, resting inside your own breathing, your own stillness, your own slow descent away from the day. And so the facts of Venus begin once again to blur into feeling. The cloud decks become curtains. The immense pressure below becomes a blanket. The hidden plains become a distant floor beneath a glowing ceiling. The backward rotation becomes a rocking motion. And the long day becomes a cradle of time large enough to hold every unfinished thought, until it no longer feels unfinished at all. If something from the day still lingers at the edge of awareness, you may place it here in this Venusian glow and watch it dissolve gently, the way a sharp shape dissolves in mist, becoming softer, dimmer, and less insistent with each quiet breath. We do not need to go any farther just now, and we do not need to turn back, because this suspended place in the lower clouds is already enough, already calm enough, already distant enough from clocks and concerns to feel like the perfect threshold of deep sleep. And as the narration grows softer and the atmosphere around us grows even more velvety, the whole world of Venus seems to whisper one final tender instruction for this chapter. Drift a little slower, rest a little deeper, loosen a little more, until the cloud-wrapped planet, the story, and your own quiet breathing all begin to move together as one long, peaceful, unbroken hush, continuing in the same slow, soothing, single-paragraph style shaped by your sample. This chapter keeps the calm, unbroken flow of sleepy science story facts, while carrying the listener farther into the serene atmosphere of Venus. Now we remain suspended in that golden veil, where the clouds of Venus seem to breathe in long and silent layers around us, and the whole planet feels like a lantern wrapped in mist, glowing softly without ever fully revealing what lies below. And because this sleep story is meant to ease you toward rest, nothing here arrives too sharply or too quickly. Not the science, not the images, not even time itself, for Venus is a world that seems to prefer the slow unfolding of everything, the patient drift of light through cloud, the gradual settling of thought into stillness, the kind of quiet that does not demand attention, but gently receives it. Round us, the haze is mellow and pearled, neither bright nor dark, but balanced in that tender middle place where waking begins to loosen, and the mind becomes more willing to wander without effort. And if you picture the light here at all, imagine it as the soft glow behind closed eyelids, warm and filtered and kind, touching every cloud layer equally, so that no edge stands out and no horizon calls you onward. Far below, still hidden beneath the immense atmosphere, the old plains of Venus lie covered under crushing pressure and tremendous heat. But in the language of this bedtime story, they remain distant and quiet, as though all the ancient volcanic stone has long ago given up every restless motion and settled into perfect silence beneath the sky's heavy embrace. That great pressure, so remarkable in the science of Venus, becomes almost comforting in a relaxing story like this one, because it suggests total enclosure, a world tucked under layer after layer of atmosphere, held so completely within its own air that nothing feels exposed, nothing feels hurried, nothing feels unfinished. Venus continues its slow backward rotation beneath us, turning in the opposite direction from most of the other planets. And that private motion now feels less like an oddity and more like a lullaby, as though the planet itself were gently rocking away from ordinary time, away from familiar patterns, away from the brisk ticking habits of the day you have left behind. A Venusian day, still longer than a Venusian year, remains one of the most soothing thoughts we can carry through this nighttime story, because it offers such a peaceful alternative to haste, such a broad and dreamy sense of duration, a reminder that in some quiet places of the cosmos, even sunrise would take its time, even daylight would arrive as if half asleep. Even the passing of hours would feel more like a long exhale than a sequence of numbered moments. Above us, far higher in the brighter reaches of the atmosphere, the clouds continue their great circling journey faster than the planet itself turns below. And that contrast of swift cloud and patient world remains deeply calming, like the final soft drift of thoughts at the top of the mind, while something deeper and heavier inside you has already gone still. Venus shines so brightly when seen from Earth because these cloud layers reflect sunlight with extraordinary generosity. And floating here within them, it is easy to understand how a world can appear so brilliant from far away, while remaining so hushed from within. For brightness is not the opposite of peace here. It is part of the peace, diffused through every layer, spread gently in every direction, until the whole atmosphere becomes a kind of luminous shelter. Venus has no moon nearby, no familiar companion crossing close beside it, and that solitude makes the planet feel even more inward and restful, like a quiet chamber in the solar system where everything unnecessary has already been removed, leaving only cloud, light, pressure, and time. If this gentle bedtime narration feels softer now, if the words seem to blur a little into atmosphere, that is perfectly welcome, because the purpose of a calming sleep story is not to hold the mind tightly awake, but to let it float, to let facts become feelings, to let science become weather, to let even a world as strange as Venus turn into a place of comfort. So the clouds become curtains, the pressure becomes a blanket, the hidden plains become a sleeping floor somewhere far below, and the slow turning of the planet becomes a cradle rhythm, rocking steadily through the dark. If any small thought still lingers from the day, any unfinished sentence of waking life, you may place it gently here in the Venusian haze and allow it to dissolve. Because this is the kind of world that softens everything it holds. A world where light is filtered, surfaces are hidden, time is stretched, and motion itself seems to yawn before it continues. We do not need to descend farther, and we do not need to explain every mystery hidden beneath these layers, because the calm of Venus does not come from complete understanding, but from patient nearness, from resting beside a cloud-covered world whose beauty lies in its secrecy, its slowness, and its willingness to remain veiled. And as this sleep story carries you onward, you may feel your own thoughts growing more cloud-like, more distant, more peaceful, until the long atmosphere around us seems to merge with the quiet within you, and the whole relaxing story becomes one continuous sensation of floating, of warmth, of soft golden stillness, of drifting beside Venus as it turns and turns and turns, so slowly that even the idea of wakefulness begins to fade, and all that remains is the deep and gentle invitation to fall asleep, continuing in the same slow, soothing, single-paragraph bedtime style shaped by your sample. This chapter remains one unbroken flow of calm narration for sleepy science story facts, with the heading separate and the continuity log placed in its own paragraph below. Now we drift through a part of Venus that feels almost like the pause between breaths, a place where the golden haze has become so soft and so complete that it no longer seems like weather at all, but like a gentle atmosphere of thought, a warm and floating quiet through which this sleep story can move without ever disturbing the stillness. And as this bedtime story goes on, you may notice how naturally the mind begins to follow the planet's example, slowing itself, softening itself, releasing the old habit of measuring everything too closely, because Venus is a world that seems to invite rest, not by becoming simple, but by becoming spacious, by surrounding every fact with enough silence that it can settle like a feather rather than strike like a stone. Around us, the clouds remain deep and luminous, pearled with reflected sunlight, layered so thickly that they turn the whole planet into a softly glowing lantern. And from within that lantern, the light feels wonderfully kind, spread evenly in all directions, without glare, without urgency, without any sharp horizon to pull the attention outward, so that instead of searching ahead, you can simply float here, held in the same mellow radiance, letting the relaxing story and the gentle bedtime rhythm carry you a little farther from the day. Far below, still unseen beneath the immense atmosphere, lie the ancient plains and rises of Venus, hidden volcanic lands that rest under such enormous pressure and heat that they seem almost beyond ordinary imagining. Yet tonight, they do not need to be imagined in detail, only in feeling as a distant, sleeping floor beneath us, a buried world under blankets of air, a secret landscape tucked away so completely that even its silence feels deep and padded. Venus continues its backward turning with that same serene patience that has followed us through the whole night-time story. And the longer we remain here, the more that slow rotation feels like a cradle motion for the mind, a reminder that there are places in the universe where time does not hurry, where a day stretches beyond a year, where dawn would linger so long that it might feel less like an event and more like a mood slowly opening through the haze. If Earth teaches the mind to notice change, Venus teaches it to notice continuity. The long, unbroken sweep of atmosphere, the steady veil of cloud, the deep, unchanging pressure below, the persistent brightness above. And perhaps that is why this calm narration can help you fall asleep so gently, because it offers a world where nothing insists, nothing rushes forward, nothing demands that you stay sharply awake to follow it. High above us, in brighter levels of cloud, the winds still circle the planet much faster than the solid globe turns beneath them. And even that contrast feels sleepy now, like the last quiet drift of thoughts moving across the surface of a mind that is already sinking into deeper rest, already giving more of itself to softness than to language. Venus has no moon beside it, no nearby companion sailing through its glowing sky, and that solitude lends the whole planet a peaceful inwardness, as though it has spent ages practicing stillness, learning how to travel alone without loneliness, holding its own company in silence. And there is comfort in that here, because deep sleep is also a kind of inward journey, private and sheltered, a soft withdrawal from brightness and responsibility into a space where nothing more is asked of you. Even the famous brightness of Venus as seen from Earth seems gentler from inside, because here the reflective cloud cover becomes not a distant sparkle, but a complete environment, a room made of pearl and honey and mist. And in that room, all the sharp corners of waking life grow dim. All the unfinished lists and conversations begin to blur, until they lose their edges and drift apart like little fragments of cloud. Another peaceful thought arrives now, one small enough to rest easily in the dark. Venus keeps its secrets not by hiding them harshly, but by wrapping them in layers. And there is something deeply restful about a world that reveals itself slowly, by patience, by nearness, by quiet attention, because the sleepy mind prefers that kind of knowing, the kind that comes gently, indirectly, and without strain. So if any part of you is still trying to stay alert, still trying to gather each sentence and hold it firmly, you may let that effort go, because this sleep story does not need to be held tightly to work its gentle magic. It only asks that you remain beside this cloud-covered world a little longer, listening as Venus turns in its slow backward grace, listening as the upper winds drift in their distant circuits, listening as the hidden plains remain far below in furnace warmth and ancient silence, listening until even listening itself begins to soften into something quieter. The facts of Venus now become almost dreamlike in their calm repetition. Bright clouds, deep pressure, hidden land, long days, backward turning, solitary orbit, all of it merging into one continuous atmosphere of rest. And within that atmosphere, your thoughts can grow thinner and softer and more transparent, until they are hardly thoughts at all, only drifting impressions moving through a warm golden mist. We do not need to go farther down, and we do not need to return yet, because this suspended place is enough. This soft horizon of cloud is enough. This slow and shining world is enough. And as the narration grows quieter and quieter, and the planet continues its unhurried motion beneath us, the whole story seems to lean toward sleep, the way a flower leans toward evening, gently, naturally, without effort, until at last the hush of Venus and the hush within you become almost the same thing, continuing in the same soft, flowing, ultra-calming bedtime style shaped by your sample. This chapter remains one unbroken passage of gentle narration, with the heading kept separate, and the continuity log placed below in its own paragraph, just as you requested. Now we remain in the hush beneath Venus's shining mist, where the light seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, and where the great planet around us feels less like a place of edges and distances, and more like a peaceful lantern suspended in the dark, glowing steadily through layer after layer of cloud. And as this sleep story continues, you may let your thoughts grow quieter still, because nothing here needs to be followed too closely. Nothing here needs to be solved, and nothing here will move too fast for the resting mind, for Venus is still turning in its own slow and private way, wrapped in brightness, wrapped in secrecy, wrapped in the kind of immense stillness that makes even time itself seem drowsy. Around us, the haze remains soft and honey pale, neither bright enough to stir wakefulness nor dim enough to feel empty, but held in that perfect middle tone where everything becomes gentle, and in that gentleness, the atmosphere seems almost kind, almost protective, as though it has taken the whole world into its quiet keeping and left no sharp corners anywhere. And if you imagine drifting here without hurry, simply carried by calm narration and the vast patience of this cloud-covered planet, then perhaps it becomes easier to feel your own breathing slow a little more, your own thoughts spread out a little wider, until they resemble these cloud layers, long and diffuse and free of urgency. Somewhere high above, the brighter cloud tops continue their broad, unseen circuits, moving with their own graceful rhythm, while far below the hidden plains remain buried beneath warmth and pressure and ancient silence. And between those two distant worlds, the bright heights and the unseen ground, we float in a middle quiet that feels wonderfully suited to sleep, because it is a place with no sudden transitions, no abrupt sounds, no need to choose between motion and stillness, only the soft coexistence of both, the whisper of atmosphere above and the deep rest of sleeping stone below. Venus has always seemed like a world made for patience, and tonight that patience becomes a cradle for the mind, because its long turning asks nothing but surrender to slowness, and its veiled face teaches the soothing lesson that not everything must be made clear before it can become beautiful. Not everything must be revealed before it can be trusted, and not every mystery must be opened before rest can come. The idea of a day here, stretching so slowly through the filtered glow, continues to feel like one of the gentlest thoughts in all of space. For on Venus time does not seem to stride forward, but to recline, to linger, to rest across the horizon like a long, soft ribbon. And if any part of you is still counting, still measuring, still trying to hold on to the ordinary pace of things, you may let that habit loosen now, because this nighttime story belongs to a different rhythm, a rhythm of clouds and distance and dreamy repetition, where even the passing of light feels almost asleep. The deeper we remain in this suspended hush, the more Venus becomes not just a planet, but an atmosphere of feeling. And its familiar truths begin to blur into something softer. The clouds become curtains around a quiet room. The long turning becomes a rocking motion. The hidden surface becomes a distant floor beneath endless blankets of air. And the whole glowing world becomes a companion in silence, steady enough to follow without effort, and remote enough to carry the mind away from whatever was heavy before the night began. There is a special comfort in how completely Venus encloses itself, how fully it wears its layers, how faithfully it keeps its hidden lands beneath that broad protective veil. Because sleep, too, is a kind of enclosure, a drawing inward, a soft retreat from the exposed places of the day. And here in this relaxing story, that retreat feels safe and natural, like drifting deeper beneath warm covers, while a calm voice continues somewhere nearby, low and even and untroubled. If any last bright fragment of waking thought still glimmers at the edge of awareness, some unfinished phrase or lingering image from the day, you may simply place it here in the Venusian glow and let it dissolve into the mist, because this is a world that softens what it holds, a world where outlines fade kindly, where distance becomes comfort, and where the mind no longer needs to carry anything with firm hands. So we remain, not descending farther, not rising away, only suspended in this quiet lantern light between shining cloud and hidden stone, while Venus continues its slow backward grace through the dark, and the story itself grows gentler with each passing sentence, softer with each breath, until the words are scarcely words anymore, only atmosphere, only warmth, only a long golden hush surrounding you from every side. And in that hush the body grows heavier, the thoughts grow lighter, and sleep, patient and silent as this cloud-wrapped world, drifts nearer and nearer, until it feels less like something approaching and more like something already here and now. As this last chapter of our sleep story arrives, the journey begins to soften into its quiet ending, and we remain beside Venus in the same warm hush that has carried us all this way, floating in the golden stillness of its cloud-wrapped world, where the light is gentle, the atmosphere is deep, and time itself seems to have forgotten any reason to hurry. And because this is the outro, because this is the final drift of this bedtime story, there is nothing more you need to picture clearly, nothing more you need to remember, nothing more you need to do except rest here for a little while longer and let the calm of Venus become the calm within you, letting the bright veils of cloud soften every thought, letting the great hidden planet turn slowly beneath you, letting the long and patient rhythm of this relaxing story carry you farther and farther away from the day. Above, somewhere beyond the pale luminous layers, the higher clouds continue their graceful circling, and far below, under all that quiet air, the unseen plains of Venus remain tucked beneath their immense blanket of pressure and warmth. But here, in this final moment, we do not need to travel upward or downward anymore, because this place between the bright heights and the hidden stone has become the perfect resting place, a suspended chamber of pearl and amber and silence. And in that silence, the mind can finally stop reaching, stop arranging, stop trying to hold itself awake. Venus, with its slow backward turning, has been teaching the same tender lesson all along, that not everything beautiful arrives quickly, that some worlds reveal themselves through slowness, through secrecy, through layers of calm. And now that lesson begins to fade from thought into feeling, from feeling into breath, from breath into the deeper quiet, where words no longer need to stand apart from one another, where the sleep story and the listener and the soft atmosphere of the night begin to blur into one long, unbroken hush. Perhaps, if you listen very gently now, the facts that once felt bright and distinct have already become something softer, the reflective clouds becoming a lamp glowing behind closed eyes, the immense pressure below becoming the feeling of warm blankets drawn close, the hidden volcanic plains becoming a distant sleeping floor beneath the world, the long Venusian day becoming a cradle of time large enough to hold every unfinished thought, until it no longer feels unfinished at all, and the backward rotation becoming a quiet rocking motion that asks the body, kindly and steadily, to let go. This nighttime story no longer needs to guide you forward in any clear direction, because you are already where you need to be, already in the calm center of the journey, already in the softened air of deep rest. And if any small piece of wakefulness still drifts at the edge of awareness, you may place it gently into the Venusian mist and watch it disappear there, not suddenly, not dramatically, but the way a shape fades in fog, becoming lighter, dimmer, less important, until it is gone. The bright evening star that people see from Earth is all around us here, diffused into a soothing glow. And it feels fitting that this final chapter should end inside that glow, inside the soft shining of a world that keeps its mysteries kindly hidden. Because sleep also arrives like that, not by revealing more, but by asking less, by dimming the outlines, by turning down the sharpness of everything, until nothing presses too closely against the mind. So let the voice become softer now, and softer still. Let each phrase drift by like a cloud band crossing a golden sky. Let every breath lengthen without effort, and allow the body to grow heavy in the best possible way, calm and supported and loose, as if you too were being held within layers of warm atmosphere, tucked beneath a planet's great hush. There's no need now to follow every sentence, no need even to follow the story at all, because the gentle bedtime rhythm has already done its work. The calming narration has already led you into quieter water, and Venus itself, with its bright clouds, slow turning, hidden surface, and endless patience, has already become less a place and more a feeling, a soft and luminous feeling of safety, distance, and rest. If thoughts come, let them come softly. If they go, let them go just as softly. If sleep is near, let it draw nearer. If deep sleep has already begun to gather, then let it gather completely, because because nothing in this final drift is meant to hold you back from it. And now the story fades the way Venusian morning might fade into cloud, slowly, almost imperceptibly, with no sharp ending, only a long, gentle thinning of sound and image and thought, until the golden haze becomes quieter than memory, quieter than language, quieter than breath, and all that remains is the stillness of the cloud-covered planet turning in its patient way through the dark, and the stillness within you answering it, matching it, yielding to it, until even that too dissolves, and there is only rest, only warmth, only the peaceful dark, only sleep.